What if I told you the most attractive man in the room isn't the richest, the tallest, or the best dressed, but the one who doesn't need anyone's approval? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why owning your worth is the ultimate kind of handsomeness, and how to get there without changing anything about your face. There's a man sitting in the corner of the room. You didn't notice him when you walked in. He's not particularly tall. His face is unremarkable, not the kind that would stop you in the street. He's wearing a plain black t-shirt and jeans, maybe a little worn at the knees. And yet somehow everyone knows he's there. The women glance at him subtly at first. The men either avoid his gaze or unconsciously mimic his posture. He hasn't said a word, but it feels like he already owns the room. That's presence, and that's the first and most underrated feature that makes a man truly handsome. Most men believe that handsomeness is a genetic lottery. You either got the jawline or you didn't. But ask anyone who's been in the game long enough in dating, in influence, in leadership, and they'll tell you. The man who gets remembered, the man who gets chosen, the man who gets respect. He's not always the prettiest face. He's the one who occupies space like he belongs there, not with arrogance. With certainty, presence begins before you say a word. It's how you walk into a room. It's whether your eyes scan with confidence or search for approval. It's your posture, yes, but not just if you stand straight. It's whether you seem grounded, like nothing can pull you off center. Let's talk about George. George wasn't a model. He was 5'8", had a bit of a nose that leaned slightly left, and had acne scars he never bothered to hide. He also never raised his voice, but when he spoke, everyone listened. In a party full of louder, flashier guys, women gravitated to him. Why? Because when George looked at someone, he saw them. He didn't rush. He didn't fidget, and here's the key, he didn't perform. He didn't try to be interesting. He was interested. That's presence. It's quiet. It's calm. It's powerful. Psychologists call it nonverbal dominance. It's the way alpha presence is communicated in the animal kingdom. 2. You don't see the silverback gorilla beating his chest 24/7. He just sits there, still, comfortable. Everyone else orbits around that comfort, and it's the same with people. When a man truly accepts himself, when he no longer seeks to impress, fix, prove, or chase, something shifts in the room around him. People can feel that. It's rare, and in a world addicted to attention, seeking. Presence is the ultimate contrast. It's magnetic. Here's a secret most men never learn. Physical beauty has a half-life that six-pack fades. The perfect haircut goes out of style. Even the most photogenic face becomes just another picture after the 100th look. But presence, that deep inner stillness combined with awareness, that's the kind of attraction that doesn't just hit, it lingers. Take Johnny Depp in the early 2000s. Was he the most handsome man alive by traditional standards? Maybe. But what really made him iconic was how slow he moved, how still he could be in chaos. You couldn't look away. He wasn't trying to please anyone, and that made him devastatingly attractive. There's another story I'll never forget. I was sitting in a bar in Berlin. A local musician, not famous, walked in. His clothes were mismatched, his hair unkempt, but something about him commanded attention. He leaned back on a chair like he owned gravity itself. He sipped his drink like there was all the time in the world. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and calm, like it had nothing to prove. I watched women change their posture around him, laugh a little too easily, glance at their friends in that "who is that" kind of way. Again, not looks, presence. So what builds presence? First, stillness. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. They fill space with nervous energy, talking too fast, checking their phones, laughing at things that aren't funny. A man with presence is comfortable in silence. He listens more than he speaks, and when he does speak, he pauses not because he's unsure, because he knows his words have weight. Second, breath. If you want to read someone's nervous system, watch their breathing. Shallow, fast breaths equals anxiety. Deep, slow breaths equals control. When a man breathes deeply and slowly, he unconsciously communicates trustworthiness, calmness, and dominance. Third, intention. Presence isn't passive. It's not just standing still like a rock. It's being tuned into your environment without being controlled by it. Think of it like this. Most people react. A man with presence responds. He decides how to move, where to look, what to say, and every move feels deliberate. It doesn't have to be loud. It just has to feel chosen. Let's be real, in the dating world, especially in the first impression window, presence matters more than features. Why? Because presence triggers a primal response. It signals security, confidence, status. Not in the fake, puffed-up kind of way, but in the I know who I am kind of way. Most men chase beauty through externals, better haircut, new cologne, designer clothes, and while all those things help, they're just signals. If the core is hollow, if the man behind the appearance still needs validation to feel okay, women sense it. Presence is the opposite, it's rooted. It's the still water under the storm. In fact, in multiple psychological experiments, when women were asked to rate men's attractiveness after only seeing their movements and posture with faces blurred out, they consistently rated the most physically average men as the most attractive, as long as they moved with confidence, calm, and deliberate intent. Presence literally overrides physical features. Now here's the part most people don't tell you. Presence is a practice. It's built. It comes from doing things that make you more centered. Martial arts, meditation, public speaking, travel, being in high pressure social situations and not folding. Every time you face discomfort without losing yourself, you build presence. So the next time you walk into a room, stop, breathe, own your space. Don't rush to say something clever. Don't try to be liked. Let people wonder who you are. Speak with pause. Move with purpose. Look people in the eye, not to dominate, but to see them. And most importantly, stop needing approval. Because the moment you stop seeking attention is the moment you start attracting it, not with a jawline, but with presence. And that, my friend, is the real definition of handsome. Imagine this: you're at dinner with someone new, the food's late, the waiter's distracted, something spills, a guy 2 tables over is being loud and obnoxious. Most people start shifting uncomfortably, complaints start brewing, anxiety spreads like smoke. But then there's this one man. He's not rattled, not reactive. He notices the chaos, but it doesn't touch him. His posture remains loose, his smile unaffected, not fake, just unbothered. He speaks slowly. He chooses humor over frustration, and the woman sitting across from him, she's leaning in, eyes focused, subtly mirroring him, because in a storm of tension, his calm is oxygen. This is emotional control, and it's devastatingly attractive. Why? Because emotional control signals certainty. It's a subtle cue that says, no matter what happens, I've got this. I don't need to force or fix. I'm solid. And that kind of groundedness is rare in a world that's always reacting. When you meet a man who doesn't get emotionally hijacked by every little challenge, who doesn't panic, doesn't lash out, doesn't play the victim, you're looking at someone who is centered. And that energy radiates far louder than anything he wears or says. It's not just attractive to women, it's respected by everyone. Let's rewind to a real story. There was a guy named Chris, average height, unassuming face, glasses that slid down his nose when he laughed. Not the kind of man most would expect to dominate a room, but he did, and he did it by staying emotionally cool. I once watched him lose a $10 deal in real time while on a phone call at a beach cafe. The client bailed. It was tense. The person next to him was visibly sweating from secondhand stress. Chris hung up, exhaled, and smiled. Guess they weren't ready, he said, then ordered another coffee like nothing happened. That wasn't detachment, that was emotional sovereignty, and the women nearby, they noticed. One even walked over to ask what he did for a living, but it wasn't about the job. It was about how he handled loss gracefully without flinching, and that calm, collected composure, handsome in the deepest sense of the word. See, emotional control is the ability to stay in your power no matter what's happening around you. It doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. It means you own them. You feel everything but express strategically. You know when to lean in and when to let go. You respond, not react. That difference is everything. Women are biologically wired to look for emotional strength in a partner, not because they're needy, but because emotional volatility signals instability. And instability on a primal level equals danger. But a man who stays calm in conflict, who doesn't buckle under pressure, who doesn't yell when things don't go his way or collapse when life gets hard, that man becomes a lighthouse in a storm. There's a study from the University of British Columbia that showed women are more attracted to men who display pride or calmness over those who constantly show excitement or stress. Why? Because excitement fades, calmness builds trust, certainty is a language, and most men never learn to speak it. Think of the archetype of James Bond, cool. Collected, you could put him in a gunfight, a burning building, or an awkward dinner party, and he's the same man. Why does that strike such a chord even decades later? Because that kind of emotional mastery is rare. He doesn't need to be loud, he doesn't need to react. His stillness commands attention. Every man wants to be him. Every woman wants to feel that energy up close. There is a myth that emotional expression means letting everything out the moment you feel it. But that's chaos. True masculinity isn't about silence. It's about discipline, feeling fully, but choosing when and how to respond, and it's this control that separates the grounded man from the boy inside the man. Another time, I watched a friend named Marcus go through a brutal breakup. The woman he thought he'd marry ghosted him after 3 years, vanished. Everyone expected him to spiral, get angry, text her endlessly, collapse in self-pity, but instead Marcus went quiet. He hit the gym, focused on his work, took a road trip, and when she resurfaced 2 months later, not only was he emotionally untouched, he'd already moved on, not from pain, but from attachment to chaos. And when they met again, she was the one holding back tears, because in losing him, she realized she lost something solid. Emotional control doesn't mean you don't feel heartbreak. It means you don't bleed it on others. It means your identity is larger than your emotions, that you feel deeply, but you're not enslaved by every wave. That's the paradox of it all. The less you're owned by your emotions, more attractive you become, because people, especially women, feel safe around you, and safety isn't boring. It's electrifying when paired with intensity and depth. It allows room for real connection without fear of volatility. One of the most attractive things a man can do on a date is stay unshaken. When things don't go as planned, when she tests your patience, when the energy shifts, and you don't flinch, that's the moment her attraction deepens, because what she sees isn't just composure, it's certainty, and certainty is rare. That's what makes it sexy. You could have perfect features, a chiseled body, designer clothes, but if you crumble the second things get uncomfortable, it all collapses. On the other hand, even if you're average in every physical way, but you move through life with emotional balance, calm under fire and grace under tension, you become magnetic. So ask yourself, how do you respond when life hits you sideways, when you're under pressure, when you're rejected, when someone challenges your ego? Because that's where real attraction is built, not in your smile, but in your emotional silence. The part of you that doesn't flinch, doesn't seek validation, doesn't need to control, but just is. A man who can hold the fire inside himself without letting it burn others is a man the world can't help but follow. And more importantly, a man she won't forget. Style is often misunderstood. People think it's about fashion trends, brands, colors, cuts. They think it's about what looks expensive or what's in. But the truth is, style isn't about trying to fit into someone else's idea of what's cool. It's about using what you wear, how you carry yourself, and how you express your aesthetic to say one powerful thing. This is who I am. Style is identity. It's a man's signature without a pen. It's not about peacocking or screaming for attention. It's about showing the world that you know yourself, and you're not afraid to be seen. Let's be honest, most men dress to not be noticed, to blend in, to stay safe. They don't want to be judged, so they throw on whatever's clean, whatever's expected, whatever's neutral. But neutral doesn't spark attraction. Neutral doesn't tell a story. Neutral is forgettable. Now picture a man who walks in wearing exactly what suits his personality, even if it breaks rules. A vintage leather jacket that's worn at the elbows, boots that tell stories, a necklace that means something to him, a scent that lingers subtly after he leaves. He's not loud, but he's noticeable, because he's chosen every piece with intent. That's the difference between fashion and style. Fashion is what the world throws at you. Style is what you throw back. I once met a guy in Lisbon named Adrian. He wasn't tall, he had a crooked tooth and wore oversized sweaters even in summer, but women noticed him, men wanted to talk to him, and it wasn't just his words, it was his aesthetic. He looked like he'd walked out of a 1970s film set, perfectly imperfect, but when you asked him about it, he'd say nothing was accidental. The boots were from his grandfather. The bracelet was handmade in Peru. The scent, an obscure tobacco vanilla blend he discovered on a solo trip through Eastern Europe. His look wasn't polished, it was personal, and that's why it worked. Women don't fall for the price tag on your outfit. They fall for what your look says about you. Do you take care of yourself? Do you know who you are? Are you bold enough to express it? Because here's the secret. Every piece of clothing you wear either adds to your presence or subtracts from it. And it's not about being fashionable. It's about alignment. When your outer expression matches your inner self, you feel authentic, and authenticity is magnetic. There's a guy named Will I saw at an underground show in Brooklyn. Everyone was in black, the uniform of safe cool. But Will, he showed up in emerald green trousers, suspenders, and a paisley button down. You could laugh or you could notice that no one else got more attention that night. It wasn't the color, it was the courage. That outfit didn't wear him, he wore it, he stood tall in it, he made it his. That's the thing about style, it's a mirror and a billboard at the same time. It reflects how you see yourself and broadcasts how others should treat you. Dress like you don't care, and people won't either. Dress like you matter, like you've thought about the details and people take note, and the details do matter, the fit of your shirt, the choice of your shoes, the confidence with which you wear something unconventional. These are all small messages that build a bigger picture. They say, I know myself. They say, I'm not afraid to be seen. They say, I bring value. There's actual science behind this. A 2015 study published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that when people dress in ways that deliberately violate the norm while still appearing intentional, they're perceived as more competent and higher status. It's called the red sneaker effect. If you show up to a formal event wearing something slightly off-script like red sneakers with a blazer and own it, people rate it as confidence, not cluelessness. But there's a thin line. Style only works when it's grounded in self-awareness. If you're copying someone else's aesthetic without understanding it, it'll feel like costume. The style must match the man, and that match is what people pick up on. Another man I knew, Daniel, always wore monochrome, black on black, gray on gray, clean lines, minimal branding. You'd think he was just being lazy until you talked to him. Daniel was an architect, obsessed with structure, form, and simplicity. His style was his brain visualized. When he spoke, everything clicked. His outfit wasn't just clothes, it was congruence. That's what makes a man's style truly handsome, not labels, not flexing, but alignment. When a woman sees a man whose outer world reflects his inner world, she feels like she can trust what she sees. There's no gap between presentation and person, and that's rare. That's what makes her lean in. Style is also a filter. It either attracts or repels, which is exactly what it should do. When you dress with intention, you stop attracting people who don't resonate with you. You stop blending in with crowds you don't even want to be part of. You start drawing in the kind of people, women included, who appreciate your individuality. It's not about being the most sharply dressed man in the room. It's about being the most self-expressed. Even if that means wearing a beat-up denim jacket you've had for 10 years. If that jacket feels like you, then wear it. Like armor, style isn't shallow. It's symbolic. It tells the world how seriously you take yourself. It reflects your self-respect, your attention to detail, and your ability to lead with creativity. Women notice that, men respect that, and the most powerful version of you emerges through it. Look at the icons, the ones who became larger than life. David Bowie, Steve McQueen, Pharrell, Keanu Reeves. None of them dressed for applause. They dressed in ways that mirrored their inner state, and that made them unforgettable. So the question isn't, what should I wear to look good? The question is, what do I wear that feels true? What tells your story without you having to speak? Because when a man steps into his true style, not the trend of the month, but his unique aesthetic language, he doesn't just look good. He looks certain, he looks defined, and that is the essence of handsomeness. Style is what makes your presence visible before your personality is even revealed. It's the first handshake you make with the world. Don't let it say, I don't care. Let it say, I know exactly who I am. You can feel it before he speaks. It's not his walk, not his suit, not even his smile. It's something deeper, subtle, but unmistakable. It's direction, purpose, a quiet intensity that says, I know where I'm going. There's nothing louder in a man's energy than knowing what he's building, not just what he does for work, but why he does it. Purpose is gravitational. When a man moves with direction, everything in his path adjusts. People notice, women notice, because deep in our wiring, we're drawn to the one who moves with intention. It's not about having all the answers. It's about knowing your why and committing to it like your life depends on it. I once met a guy named Illy on a red-eye flight to Berlin. Soft-spoken, unshaven, hoodie and jeans. not what you'd call traditionally handsome. But the flight attendant lingered every time she passed his row. The woman beside him kept asking questions. Why? Because when he talked about his work developing sustainable water systems for refugee camps, his entire face changed, his words slowed down, his voice deepened. He stopped trying to impress and simply shared. That clarity, that purpose, that was what drew everyone in. It wasn't about charm, it was about mission. Women don't just fall for looks, they fall for movement, for vision, for the quiet thrill of orbiting a man who's going somewhere, fast or slow, as long as it's real. Purpose isn't performative, it doesn't need a podium or applause, it's what makes a man walk differently. Make decisions differently. Say no to things most people chase, and yes to things that scare them. And that conviction, that's what turns average into unforgettable. Look around at the men who captivate others. They're not always the tallest, richest, or most genetically gifted, but they have an inner compass. They don't float, they drive, and even if you don't agree with their path, you feel the pull of it, because purpose shines in the dark. There's a scientific reason behind this magnetic effect. Studies in evolutionary psychology show that women are hardwired to value resource potential, not just money, but the ability to acquire, create, and lead. It's not about gold digging, it's about survival wiring. A man with direction signals security, ambition, and the ability to endure. Purpose is nature's version of a beacon. It says, I will provide, I will protect, I will persist. But it goes beyond biology. On a human level, purpose is what makes a man feel alive, and aliveness is sexy. It's rare. Too many men drift through life passively, letting circumstances define them instead of forging a path. That drift shows in their posture, their tone, their relationships. But a man on fire with purpose, he becomes unforgettable, even in silence. I remember Jason, a sculptor in Rome. He barely used social media, didn't care for small talk. But his studio was a temple to obsession, blocks of marble, dusty sketches, half-finished statues. He talked about art like it was breath. He was broke half the time, but women flocked to him. Why? Because when he talked about creation, he lit up, and his eyes, quiet, focused, told you this wasn't a phase, it was who he was. His drive was the attraction. See, when a man commits to something larger than himself, it changes how he shows up. He stops chasing attention. He doesn't need to impress. He knows what matters. He says no faster. He walks away easier, not because he's cold, but because his time means something. He has a direction, and distractions don't pull him off course. That's intoxicating. A man who doesn't need you to complete him. A man who wants you, but doesn't collapse without you, because his purpose is his anchor. And when he brings that energy into a relationship, it lifts everything. The connection doesn't become a dependency. It becomes a shared orbit. But here's the raw truth. Finding your purpose doesn't mean you have to be Elon Musk or Muhammad Ali. It's not about grand gestures or global fame. It's about choosing a direction, any direction, and owning it with your full chest. That could mean writing songs in your bedroom, running a coffee shop with soul, raising your kid like it's your life's art. Purpose is deeply personal, but universally attractive, because the man who knows what drives him and isn't afraid to burn for it is the man everyone remembers. I once coached a guy named Mark. On paper, he had it all: great job, nice car, decent looks. But he couldn't keep a woman's attention past a few dates. Why? Because he was living someone else's blueprint. Safe job, safe condo, safe goals, but no fire, no drive. We dug deep. Turned out he'd always wanted to work in wilderness survival, but never gave himself permission. 6 months later, he quit his job, started a YouTube series teaching basic skills, and went all in. His subscriber count grew, but more importantly, so did his presence. He started walking taller, speaking clearer. Women noticed, not because he became cooler, but because he came alive. Purpose wakes a man up, sharpens him, makes his presence feel like gravity. Here's the twist. It doesn't even matter if he's made it yet. A man on the path is already attractive. What kills attraction is stagnation. A man waiting for something to happen, hoping life will give him permission to begin. But when you choose purpose, when you draw a line in the sand and say, this is where I'm going, people feel it. They lean in, not to where you are, but to where you're going, because we don't follow perfect. We follow movement, and the man who moves with clarity, passion, and direction, he becomes the center of his own universe, and others by choice, not force, begin to orbit around him. You know the type. the guy who doesn't give everything away, who listens more than he speaks, who seems like there's something behind his eyes, a story, a contradiction, an edge you can't quite touch. He's not trying to impress, he's not putting on a show, but somehow you can't stop thinking about him. That's the power of mystery and depth. And in a world where attention is currency and everyone's trying to be loud, the man who leaves a little unsaid becomes unforgettable. Surface-level charm has a short shelf life. Anyone can rehearse a few good lines, post filtered photos, talk about their achievements, or make you laugh for an evening. But after that, if there's no substance, no layers, the attraction dies where it stands. What captivates people, especially women, is what lies beneath the surface, the unspoken, the unresolved, the real. There's a reason the strong, silent type still holds power, not because he's emotionally unavailable, but because he's not emotionally overexposed. A man with mystery doesn't need to parade every thought he has. He doesn't spill his entire life story in the first 5 minutes. He makes you want to know more. That want creates curiosity. Curiosity creates pursuit. I once met a guy in Istanbul named Omar. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't overly social. But there was something in how he moved through the room, how he observed before engaging, how he answered questions with honesty but never too much. He shared in layers, not in downloads, and what made people lean in wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't say. The room wanted to unlock him, and that desire, that's magnetic. Mystery isn't about being evasive or manipulative. It's about depth, real, lived depth. Because when a man has been places emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, he carries that history in his energy. He's seen things, he's learned things, he's lost, failed, rebuilt. That doesn't make him brooding, it makes him rich, and people can feel that richness. It makes them want to know where it came from. There's something deeply human about wanting to unravel someone, but only if there's something worth unraveling. Think of the difference between a puddle and a well. A puddle is visible in one glance, it's shallow, you know everything about it in 2 seconds, but a well makes you curious. You want to know how deep it goes, what's at the bottom, what it draws from. The man who embodies mystery and depth is that well, and people instinctively want to drink from it. Women especially are wired to look beyond the surface. A handsome face might spark interest, but it's the internal complexity, the man who feels things deeply, thinks independently, and chooses his words carefully that creates long-term fascination. Depth doesn't mean being dark. It means being layered. A man who can speak about heartbreak without bitterness, who can sit in silence without fidgeting, who reads as much as he trains, who has private joys and private struggles, not because he's hiding them, but because he doesn't need to prove anything. I remember Jordan, a photographer I worked with in Prague. He wasn't loud in any sense. He dressed simply, he spoke sparingly, but when he showed you his work, the emotion in his portraits, the patience in how he captured light, you saw who he really was. And if you asked the right questions, he'd open up about the people he'd met, the wars he'd seen, the beliefs he was still questioning. You left every conversation with more questions than answers, and that made you want the next conversation even more. That's what depth does. It pulls people back in. It doesn't rely on gimmicks. It builds gravity over time. There's a psychological concept called the mere exposure effect. We tend to like things more when we're exposed to them repeatedly. But when combined with partial disclosure, giving someone just enough to make them want more, it becomes a powerful tool of attraction. That's what deep men do. They reveal themselves in layers not to manipulate, but because they live with integrity. And real integrity takes time to uncover. In relationships, depth is what makes love evolve rather than evaporate. Charm wears off, excitement fades, but curiosity keeps growing. A woman who feels like there's always another part of you to discover, a thought, a fear, a dream, a contradiction, stays emotionally invested. She's not chasing novelty. She's chasing understanding, and that chase keeps the connection alive. But depth doesn't happen by accident. It comes from living, from choosing real experiences over safe ones, from doing the inner work, from reading, thinking, reflecting. From making time to be with yourself, not just present yourself. A man with depth has boundaries. He doesn't let everyone in. He chooses who he shares his truth with, and when he does open up, it matters, because it's not just information. It's a gift. That selectiveness makes the connection feel sacred. I once knew a guy named Leif, a software developer who moonlighted as a poet. He never led with that, but on a third or fourth conversation, if you asked him about books, he'd eventually mention it, almost apologetically. And if you leaned in, he'd pull a dog-eared notebook from his coat and read something that made the whole room go still. That quiet moment, the unexpected vulnerability, the earned trust, hit harder than any flashy opener ever could. That's the essence of masculine mystery, not being unreadable but being worth reading slowly. A man who doesn't reveal himself to be validated. He reveals himself only when it's real. We live in an age of oversharing, of loud branding, of instant access to curated personalities. So when a man steps away from all that, when he resists the urge to broadcast, and instead cultivates his inner world, he becomes rare. And rarity is irresistibly attractive. You don't have to be a genius, you don't have to be a monk, but you do have to think deeply, feel honestly, and live intentionally. That depth will bleed into everything: how you listen, how you love, how you lead. And when people meet you, they'll feel something different. Something slow, burning, something unforgettable, because mystery and depth don't shout, they echo. You've seen him walk into the room. No need for an announcement, no flashy outfit, no desperate need to be liked. Yet heads turn, conversations shift, and people instinctively make space for him. He doesn't dominate the room with volume. He glides through it with precision. That's not charisma. That's social fluency. And it's one of the most potent, underrated features that make a man undeniably handsome. Social fluency is more than just being good with people. It's the ability to read the temperature of a room, to speak the right language in the right moment, whether that's silence, humor, empathy, or assertiveness. A socially fluent man doesn't chase approval, he understands connection. He moves between different social environments with agility, adapting without performing, engaging without overextending, and asserting without overpowering. It's power dressed in poise. There's a subtle psychological principle at work here. In evolutionary terms, high-status men in any tribe or society had one thing in common: they could influence group behavior. They knew when to speak, what to say, and how to keep peace or ignite movement. Even in today's modern world, that instinct lingers. We instinctively feel drawn to those who can command a social space, not through dominance, but through grace under pressure. I remember a guy named Rami. We met at a workshop in Lisbon, a mix of entrepreneurs, artists, and digital wanderers. At first glance, Rami wasn't loud or traditionally handsome. But within an hour, he knew everyone's name, had already cracked a few inside jokes with the hosts, and somehow made everyone feel like they belonged. Not once did he interrupt, brag, or push himself forward. He just understood how to listen, when to mirror energy, and when to gently steer a conversation toward depth. Women, of course, noticed, not because he was hitting on anyone he wasn't, but because he created connection so naturally without trying. He didn't force rapport. He generated it by making others feel seen. That skill is far more seductive than pick-up lines or confidence tricks. It's social intelligence at its finest. And that's what makes people gravitate toward you without knowing why. There's something profoundly attractive about a man who's comfortable in every social setting. Whether it's a rooftop party or an intense dinner with strangers, he adapts not by becoming someone else, but by tuning in to what's needed. That adaptability comes from emotional awareness, empathy, and, most importantly, intentional practice. Social fluency isn't a talent, it's a cultivated skill. The difference between a man who fumbles in social spaces and the one who thrives is often just a matter of presence and perception. The fluent man doesn't wait to be interesting. He becomes interested. He scans the environment for nuance, who's being ignored, who's dominating, where energy is building. He doesn't push into the spotlight. He guides it when needed. There's a reason people fall harder for men who have this quality. They signal something deeper than charm. They show emotional control, respect, command. In a world where people often talk over each other, The man who listens with intensity, who remembers small details, who adapts his tone without losing his core, he stands out. Think about the best conversationalists you know. They don't just talk, they shape conversations. They use their voice like a musical instrument, pausing where it matters, raising it with passion when the moment's right, lowering it to draw people closer. That's social craftsmanship, and like any craft, it's both art and science. Here's something most people miss. Social fluency isn't about being the center of attention. It's about controlling your energy, knowing when to be high energy and when to be calm, when to provoke, when to empathize, when to disappear for a while and let others rise. That energy control is what makes people feel safe around you, especially women. Because women, more than anything, read emotional temperature. And a man who can navigate the energy of a room signals emotional intelligence at its highest level. I once watched a guy named Max diffuse a heated debate at a mutual friend's wedding. The conversation was teetering on politics and getting sharp. Instead of awkwardly trying to change the subject, Max leaned in, acknowledged the tension, cracked a subtle self-deprecating joke that made both sides laugh, and redirected everyone to a shared memory of the groom. The room shifted instantly, from tension to laughter. That's what social fluency looks like in real time. Not avoidance, navigation. And that navigation is what separates a man who merely shows up from a man who shapes the mood of any room he enters. But let's go deeper. Social fluency also comes with restraint, knowing what not to say. There's a quiet sexiness in the man who doesn't need to dominate conversations, who isn't triggered by every disagreement, who doesn't need to win every verbal sparring match. That self-restraint is the hallmark of inner strength, and it's powerful. When a man chooses his words carefully, it tells the room, this is someone who values connection more than ego. And connection, real connection, is what women are drawn to most. There's research to back this. Studies in social psychology show that emotional intelligence, particularly empathy, active listening, and conflict de-escalation, significantly increase romantic attraction. Why? Because women associate these skills with trustworthiness, safety, and strength, and trust is the foundation of desire. A socially fluent man knows how to hold space. He doesn't need to perform. He creates an environment where others feel more themselves. That freedom to be fully seen and accepted is intoxicating. It's what keeps people coming back. Not for entertainment, but for connection. Let me tell you about Kaito, a quiet jazz musician I met in Tokyo. He barely spoke in large groups, but when he did, every word had rhythm. He made you lean in. At dinners, he asked people questions no one else thought to ask, not what do you do, but what are you trying to build this year? Or what song do you think describes your mood lately? It wasn't gimmicky. It was genuine. Women weren't just drawn to him because he was talented. They were drawn because he noticed things. That noticing, that rare blend of attentiveness and insight, made every woman feel interesting in his presence. That's the real heart of social fluency. It's not about how you're perceived. It's about how others feel around you. If they feel smarter, safer, funnier, more seen, you become unforgettable. Because in a world full of noise, the man who understands people will always stand out. And the man who can make everyone around him feel like they belong, he becomes magnetic, irresistibly so. You don't have to be built like a Greek statue to command attention. But the way you carry your body, the way you move, the way you stand, the way you take up space, speaks volumes before you ever say a word. Physicality and posture are silent messengers. They tell people what kind of man you are, what you believe about yourself, and how the world should respond to you. And make no mistake, people listen. Strength isn't just about muscle. It's about discipline. It's about a man who's shown up for himself day after day, rep after rep, even when no one was watching. That consistency radiates, not just in a bigger chest or defined arms, but in a quieter, more primal signal. This man respects himself. Posture, similarly, is not just about standing tall. It's about being rooted. Shoulders back, chest open, chin slightly lifted, relaxed but alert. These aren't just aesthetic choices. They're biological cues. They signal confidence, presence, and emotional balance. And yes, women notice. Everyone does. I once met a guy named Luca on a long train ride through southern Italy. He wasn't particularly tall. He didn't have a model's face, but when he stepped onto the train, people made space. There was no arrogance in his stride. Just calm control. He stood like someone who trusted the ground beneath him, who had nothing to prove but everything to offer. And the subtle ripple of interest he created among passengers, especially women, was undeniable. That's the effect of posture married to purpose. Science backs it up. Social psychologist Amy Cuddy's famous research on power posing showed that people who adopted expansive, confident body language, even for just 2 minutes, experienced boosts in testosterone and decreases in cortisol. Translation: they felt more confident, and others sensed it. Your body doesn't just reflect your emotions. It informs them, and the world responds to the signals your body sends. Now imagine a man who not only stands tall in a moment of performance, but leaves that way every day. A man whose posture isn't a pose, but a reflection of how he moves through life. There's a story about a veteran named Jalen I met in San Diego. After years in the military, he had developed a quiet, almost meditative presence. His posture was impeccable, not stiff, not showy, just centered. When he spoke, he didn't flinch or fidget. When he listened, he gave you his full attention. One night, someone asked him what gave him that stillness. He said, "I stopped trying to prove my strength and started carrying it." That line stuck with me. Because carried strength, not performed, not shouted, is one of the most magnetic things a man can embody. Let's talk about physicality beyond posture. It's easy to think of strength as something for gym selfies or physical competition. But true physical presence is about something deeper. It's about how you occupy space with awareness, how you move in conversation, how you breathe when others get nervous, how your body becomes a source of stability, not tension, in the room. A man who is in tune with his body doesn't just move with precision, he radiates self-possession. Women notice that. Not because of aesthetics, but because of what it represents. Mastery, strength is earned. And that journey of earning it, through discipline, failure, recovery, consistency, shapes more than your body. It shapes your identity. Every time you show up to train, you're saying, "I'm choosing growth over comfort." That mentality translates into how you show up for conversations, for work, for love. Women don't just respond to biceps or six-packs, they respond to the story behind that body. The resilience, the commitment, the man who knows how to delay gratification, who chooses discomfort today for a better tomorrow. That's the kind of strength that sticks. It builds trust. Because if you've trained your body with that kind of loyalty, people sense that you'll show up for them the same way. Physical presence also creates safety. There's an ancient instinct in all of us. We gravitate toward people who can protect. But protection today isn't about being a warrior in a jungle. It's about emotional steadiness, physical awareness, and being a grounded presence in chaos. A man whose physicality says, "I've got this," even without words, becomes a natural leader in moments of uncertainty. I once watched a guy named Karim step into a situation at a beach in Morocco where a child had gotten lost. Panic was rising, people were shouting, scattering. Karim didn't yell, he simply moved fast, purposeful, focused. His posture never broke. He found the child in less than 10 minutes, brought him calmly back to his mother, and didn't stay for applause. That kind of presence, built on physical readiness and emotional control, doesn't need a spotlight. The room remembers it anyway. There's also the way posture affects interaction. A man who slouches, folds into himself, or shifts nervously while talking sends one message: "I'm unsure." A man who stands grounded, meets your eyes and breathes fully sends another: "I'm here with you, and I'm not going anywhere." That energy calms, it excites, it anchors. Here's the truth most men miss. Posture and presence lead the room. They set the tone before words do, and if your body is betraying your words if you say, "I'm confident," but your shoulders are hunched. People believe your posture, not your mouth. But this isn't about being rigid. It's about being congruent, about aligning your body with your values. If you value presence, stand like you're present. If you value strength, move like you've earned it. If you value connection, hold space with your entire body, not just your voice. You don't need to become a bodybuilder. You don't need military-level posture, but you do need awareness. Spend time training your body not just for appearance, but for integrity. Practice posture not just for attraction, but for alignment. Because when your body reflects your inner state, calm, confident, committed, people feel it. And when they feel it, they trust it. They lean in. They see a man who isn't just handsome. They see a man who's centered. There's a quiet kind of power in a man who no longer needs to prove himself. A man who doesn't chase attention, doesn't flinch at rejection, and doesn't bend his identity just to be liked. That power isn't born from arrogance, it's born from self-acceptance, and that, more than any jawline, height, or social trick, is the highest form of handsomeness. You can spot this man instantly, though he's rarely the loudest in the room. He moves without apology. He speaks without over-explaining. He listens with presence instead of planning the next thing to say. He doesn't wear masks or play roles to fit in because he already fits within himself and that internal security. It's magnetic. Why? Because the world is full of people trying to become something. Trying to chase worth, chase love, chase applause. But a man who's already accepted himself, flaws, edges, past power doesn't chase, he attracts, he gives others permission to exhale, to be real, to stop performing, and in a culture addicted to perfection and performance, that kind of man feels like water in a desert. Let's be clear, self-acceptance isn't the same as self-delusion. It's not I'm perfect and never need to grow. It's I know exactly who I am, the good, the bad, the evolving, and I love myself anyway. That's a deeper kind of confidence. One that doesn't need to flex or posture because it's rooted in truth. I once met a guy named Jordan at a retreat in Costa Rica. He wasn't flashy, he had visible scars from a car accident and walked with a slight limp, but the moment you sat down with him, you felt his ease. He didn't hide anything. If you asked about the accident, he'd tell you without drama or shame. If you disagreed with him, he didn't get defensive, he stayed open. That kind of security made people want to be around him. Women especially weren't drawn to his looks. They were drawn to how fully he owned himself. Because when you accept yourself, you stop looking for someone else to do it for you. That's the paradox. The less you seek validation, the more it comes. The less you try to prove worth, the more people assume you already have it. Self-acceptance radiates. It affects how you speak, how you touch, how you hold silence. It shows up in your humor, unafraid to laugh at yourself. In your posture, relaxed, not tense. In your eyes, present, not searching. Psychologists have long linked self-acceptance to emotional well-being, resilience, and social success. One landmark study by the Journal of Personality found that people with high self-acceptance had significantly lower levels of anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. Why? Because when you accept yourself, you stop living in fear of being found out. You stop wearing armor. You just are. This is especially powerful in relationships because the truth is people don't fall in love with perfect. They fall in love with real, and real is messy, flawed, human. When a man accepts himself, he creates a kind of safety. I'm not going to turn into someone else tomorrow. I'm not pretending now just to impress you. That consistency is deeply attractive. I remember a moment in Bali when I watched a friend named Raphael get turned down by a woman at a social event. Most guys would have brushed it off with forced bravado or awkward escape. Raphael smiled, genuinely thanked her for her honesty, and stayed present. He didn't flinch, didn't make it weird, he just stayed himself, and what happened next was stunning. Within 20 minutes, another woman approached him. Not because he'd played games, but because self-acceptance is irresistible. It signals, this man doesn't crumble under rejection. This man is whole, with or without you. In contrast, men who lack self-acceptance tend to shapeshift. They become what they think others want, more aggressive, more charming, more agreeable, and in doing so, they betray themselves. That betrayal eventually leaks into their energy. People feel the inauthenticity. Women sense the insecurity. Even if the mask is convincing at first, it always slips. The man who accepts himself doesn't need a mask. He's not perfect. Maybe he's still working through insecurities. Maybe he's not where he wants to be financially, emotionally, or even physically. But he doesn't hide from it. He names it, and that naming, yeah, I'm still figuring that out, is powerful. Because most people are terrified of being seen. The man who isn't, he becomes a lighthouse in a foggy world. Self-acceptance also fuels courage, because when you're not terrified of being judged, you take more risks. You say what you actually think. You walk away when things don't feel aligned. You stop needing every conversation or interaction to validate your identity. That gives you freedom, and freedom is sexy. Think about every great male figure who draws people in, not just with looks, but with presence. Whether it's a leader, an artist, or even just that grounded friend everyone trusts, their draw doesn't come from perfection. It comes from authenticity, from the ability to stand fully in who they are, no edits, no filters, no need to impress. One of the most profound things you can say without ever using words is, I'm enough, I want to grow, yes, but I don't need to be fixed. I like who I am, even as I evolve. That energy quiets rooms. It disarms defenses. It invites real intimacy, not the performative kind, but the soul-level kind that only happens when two people stop trying to be impressive and start being honest. And here's the secret: self-acceptance is not a destination. It's a practice. You earn it by facing yourself again and again, by sitting with your darkness instead of hiding it, by forgiving yourself when you fall short and still showing up the next day. You can't fake it, but you can build it. One breath at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of truth at a time. Because the most handsome man in the room isn't always the one with the best jawline, the sharpest suit, or the biggest smile. It's the one who walks in already whole, already home in himself, and invites others to do the same. If this hit you deeper than surface-level advice, go ahead and hit that like button, and subscribe for more content that builds real confidence, not just the kind that looks good in photos, but the kind that feels right in your soul.